questions that were pertaining to first the school as a whole.
Let me
And
apologize
then,
first, Lauren. I'm going to record this, and I apologize. I should have done this before. So I want to be able to share this with our School of Information person who's helping us on this. So go ahead, Lauren. I apologize.
alrighty, I'll start over.
Okay, thank you.
I interviewed Marcia Williams. She is the principal at University High School Academy in Southfield, where I went to high school. And at first, I asked her questions pertaining to the school itself, business, how things were running, and then I asked her about the students' mental well-being, her mental well-being, like how it's affecting her staff too. And they were all, of course, centered around internet access. So for like the first question, how has the pandemic affected how you do business as a school? What is the workload looking like? How have things changed? I know in the past she was very active. Every time you see her in the hallway, she was walking to go do something because she was in there. If there was a question needed to be done, if there were just things to be looked at, she was doing it because that's the kind of principal she was. And she said like things have shifted, of course, because there are no students in the school, so you don't do that anymore. Do we get into answers too, or do we want to just do
No,
strictly
let's wait
questions?
for the answers and then just talk about. But I do like the what you're talking about. Who was your interview? A principal, and she was very active. What other
Yeah.
descriptive? How would you describe this person and about who as an informant?
As an informant, she was extremely friendly and a very open. Having had a past relationship with her, I could ask her. I could ask her things and she would be extremely open with me because she knows that I'm coming at this with no bias at all. And I'm hoping for her to be extremely open to me because this is about their situation as a whole. So it was very nice to see her in that way. So like I said, like in the past, that's how she was, and I figure that's how she
Hmm.
was still. So for now, like since things are online, it's always email, 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 phone call, and then sometimes when we had our meeting, she had just came back from a meeting at the school board because they have to still do those in small groups.
Hmm.
Um, so
So
second
I
question
can
is, oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Second question was about the staff and planning for the school year. So I asked her for this school year, not just in when COVID first hit, because she was talking about what they had learned during that time and how it made changes in their implications for this school year. So she said when COVID first happened, like everything shut down. We just had to go like on a limb with it. So they had learned in situation that they had to do particular things to make it easier on the staff, but more importantly on the students,
Hmm.
which is really hard when it has to be online. They do things like make sure everybody has Wi-Fi. Oh yeah,
Okay. So did you? I'm going to have to cut you off. But did you ask any other questions? Those two.
yeah.
So
I
just go through
asked
the questions.
12 questions.
Okay.
As
12.
like
Oh my goodness. Okay.
we talked for a little while.
Okay.
Like I asked her to walk me through a typical school day for her.
Uh-huh.
Like what are they using like online, Google Classroom, Canvas, Blackboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then the mental strain so far on the semester for herself and for the students. And I had some three-parter questions, but I'm not going to get into those.
Okay.
And like when system crashes happen, how do you handle that? Because it's inevitable. There's a lot of people using it, and how do they, as a school, get through that? Which is like the biggest thing that I was seeing when I was talking to my sister, and my mom, because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get to talk to any other students.
It's a tough what?
I didn't get to talk to any other students about what they were
Okay.
experiencing, but I got from my sister like secondhand accounts like, yeah, this is really frustrating for all of us.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. Let's go to Mackenzie.
Yeah, so I interviewed. Her name is Penny, and she's a family friend. She volunteers in the school just as like a not a teacher's aide, but they have like some like programs within the school that she volunteers with, so she gets to interact with the kids. And she also has a granddaughter that lives with her that goes to the local high school in my hometown. So I picked her because she has that dual experience of having a kid who goes to the school and also working within the school. So she kind of, sees both sides. One of the first questions I asked her was her experience with her granddaughter in the transition in the springtime from when lockdowns first began and how they navigated going to school and then that abrupt, like, oh, there's no more school, and then the online that like was like hard to, you know, navigate in terms of like what grades count and stuff. Um, Another question I asked was her experience navigating the way, since grades didn't necessarily count towards their GPAs, like the discipline she had to, or lack thereof, in order to get her granddaughter to actually do the work when, there was the stressors of, lockdown and COVID and not wanting to do work because she's not in school. Um, then I also asked about how this fall has changed within the school system and how the kids interact with each other, like in hallways and things like that, like the separation between the kids and things like that, and how, certain classes go at certain times and there's no more that like mingling. And she also, since her granddaughter's in the high school, I wanted specifically things about the elementary school that she volunteers in. And they have like this little like reward store that kids can go to and
Oh,
rewards and stuff. And I wanted to know how that was functioning with like the trying to minimize contact between kids and how that was changing, and also her like relationships with the teachers and kind of what she has heard them struggle about.
mhm,
Pretty
great.
much encompasses what I asked about.
Okay, great. So Lauren was the principal and yours was the point of view of a staff person, volunteer, and a sort of parent figure.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very good. Caitlin.
So I wasn't able to get an interview because I had planned to do it this past week during break. And the one teacher that I reached out to, they were dealing with COVID in their family, so I didn't want to stress her out with that. And then the other one was like out of town for break, and he didn't really want to like deal with, you know, thinking about school stuff. So I'm hoping that, like by next week I'll be able to
Yeah,
interview them.
okay. That'll be a really interesting perspective, a teacher who has COVID in her family. And then I know a lot of teachers are under a lot of stress. So this whole, I'm just reading the papers. It's like everybody. So it's be very interesting. Okay, great, thanks. Ellington, take it
Hi.
away.
So I actually interviewed 4 different people. So the
Mhm.
3 of them were my siblings, and they all go to the same school. And then one is a family friend, and he's in high school. So it was really interesting to see all their different perspectives. And I kind of tailored my questions a little bit differently for my younger siblings, so that they could actually understand the questions. And then also I asked different questions depending on their answers as well. If I needed more clarification for something or heard something that was interesting and I wanted to hear more about, but kind of the like basic questions that I asked was, has it seemed any more difficult, easier, about the same taking classes online? I asked them if they could describe their interactions between their teachers and their classmates in the virtual setting. I asked them if their teachers were at home teaching or if they were in the classroom, and then also how the teachers worked with the online format, if they seemed to have difficulties, if they weren't understanding how to like navigate things or like share a screen or something like that. I also asked them if they themselves had experienced any technical difficulties and how did they handle that. And then I also asked them if they needed any help with anything, how were they able to ask their teachers? Did their teachers have time outside of their classroom designated to speak with students individually, or was it all kind of in class? I asked them also about their workload. So if they found it to be a heavier workload than when they were in person, or if it was the same, or if it was even lighter.
Okay.
I asked about some if they saw like what are some of the advantages versus disadvantages for taking classes online. I also asked if they knew anything about how students were receiving, if they were getting like loan laptops or hotspots. I asked them like, do any of your friends have it? Do you know how they were distributing them? If they have to turn them back in at the end of the year.
Mhm.
And then I also asked them at the end, like if there was anything that they thought their teachers could be doing or overall that could be done for the classes to be improved anyway, since they're
Okay.
online.
Great. So you two siblings, was it?
3.
3 siblings and 1
Mhm.
family friend. Is that
Mhm.
right? Was the family friend a student or
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah,
So they're all
he's in high school.
okay, high school, right. And then the 3 sibs were in various grade school and middle school or
They're in 4th and 5th grade, so they're in elementary school.
gotcha. Excellent. Okay, great. Good.
Mhm.
Wow, this is a great spread. So thank you. Thank you, Ellington. Maggie, let's do you next.
Yeah. So I chose to interview 2 people. It was my mom and dad. Since they are both high school teachers who were 2 of 3 teachers at my high school who got moved to being in charge of the virtual program, I figured they'd be a really good source of information. Since I knew the conversation was going to be able to flow really easily, I didn't prepare many questions because I knew we would just be able to like conversationally move to different topics, but I kind of set up 3 different areas of questions. The first one was how the virtual program is set up in general, how the school managed to do that, what program is being used, who's involved in this, how that's running. The second group of questions were more focused on the teacher's perspective of how the students are adapting and how they're handling it. And then the third group of questions was how this has personally affected them, and like what their roles have been.
Great. And they're high school teachers.
Yes.
Okay, great. What do they teach? I'm just curious.
My dad's in charge of the computers and math in the high school, and my mother's in charge of science from middle school and high school.
Okay. Okay, great. So, okay, super. That's great. Good questions. So we'll go then. I want to give enough time to talk. Let's go to Layla now.
Hey. Okay.
Hey,
So
hi.
the
So,
person I'm going to interview is Rachel Cruiser. She's a math teacher at Ipsy High. We've just been kind of emailing back and forth because when we were supposed to interview, she kind of got busy. So we're trying to find a date to interview.
okay.
But been talking about like how's it been like mentally for her and the students and like the differences between online school and like regular school. Yeah, but I think we're gonna try to meet in between this week and next week, hopefully.
Okay, great. And she's a math teacher, and you had her in school?
Yes, at Ipsy High.
Okay, good. Okay, so you're just going to ask the general differences about, between online and virtual learning.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, and Nick.
Hey, so I did 2 interviews. I interviewed one of our good family friends who my mom also works with. So she's a working mother and her husband also works, and they have 3 boys. And the situation they have at their house right now, actually, they set up like a kind of classroom in their basement. And they have, so for the 3 kids to virtually learn down there throughout their like virtual school day. But then what's also interesting about their situation is that they have 2 other neighborhood families like that live in their neighborhood. Their kids are also using their downstairs basement. So it's like a little schoolhouse like within like their neighborhood.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
was just asking a bunch of questions about that because obviously she's busy working and so is her husband. And then they have like all those kids like in their house trying to learn as well. So there have obviously been challenges with that, but they've also been like really lucky in terms of having like some older kids who are able to like give guidance to the younger ones. And
Mhm.
also it actually hasn't been as much of a crazy situation as you could imagine.
Mhm.
It was really interesting hearing about that. All of it's kind of in a pretty privileged community. Like they all have laptops. Some of them have iPads. They're all able to. They all have internet access. The digital access is all there. So, that situation actually worked out pretty well for having kind of a big scene in their house.
Mhm.
And then the second person that I interviewed is also another family friend, and she works at a charter school in kind of inner city Minneapolis, and that has been a tremendous struggle this whole year, trying to get all of her students internet access, digital access, making sure they're staying on top of their stuff. There's a lot of kind of chasing down students virtually to try to get them to um, uh, kind of behave appropriately, like over Zoom, and also just having trouble getting in touch with like their parents. And so it sounds like it's been like a real challenge. Um,
Okay.
and
Let's not get too much into the guts of it. What kind of questions did you ask?
well,
Yeah.
the last person I just talked about. So the kind of questions I asked were, have you noticed any challenges in terms of your students having digital access, having access to internet? Do you feel like you're able to teach effectively still over Zoom on these virtual platforms? Do you feel like your students are, finishing assignments? Do you feel like they're working on things? Do you feel like engagement is still there as it would be like in normal classroom? Those were a few of the questions I was asking.
Okay, cool. Great. So let's take a couple of minutes and what kind of notes did you make and what kind of triggers did you get from who we're talking to and the questions, the range of questions? Any reactions at all? So look at your notes that you made. If you didn't make notes, think about the notes you might have made and make them up right now.
I made a note that a lot of us seeked out school staff and like principals and teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and we got like that side. But I really like that Ellington got the student side a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
because she lost her siblings, which is something I was thinking about doing. But my little sister's really stressed right now, so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll talk to her about that next week.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to see like what the students are feeling because while the teachers might be doing a lot for everybody, what's really important is how the kids are feeling individually
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because that is what like all of this is for, is to make this easier for them to, because they're trying to learn in this situation that is almost impossible to want to do work in, let alone actually like take in the information. So
Mm-hmm.
I really like that point, like the differences between most of ours and like people who
Yeah.
were able to actually interview their siblings.
Yes. Great. Any other? Let's have some more comments. That's great. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, I also noticed, I was really happy to hear that multiple people asked this question in a sense because it came up organically in my conversation and I found that was a really interesting answer. But the difference between how the teachers are perceiving students learning the information on virtual compared to what it would have been in person. And I think that was a really important part of the virtual. Where are they getting the correct information they would be getting? But yeah, I noticed that that came up in a couple of people when they were asking questions, and I thought that was really
Mm-hmm.
valuable information.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, that's great. Thanks, Maggie. Anything? What else? Notes and observations and issues. I think we got a pretty good. I'll just jump in. I think we got a pretty good representation of at least one. Lauren had a principal. We had a couple of volunteers. We had this really interesting and unusual what do you call those things where you cluster of people that get together? Pod. They call them pods now. That was really weird. Sounds science fiction, really. With that Nick mentioned, but a bunch of teachers, as well as volunteers, as well as students. But you're right, Lauren, quite a few teachers, and that's okay. But the SIBs, I think the SIBs would be really interesting, Ellington, to see how those SIBs work, because that's something that in a real classroom you wouldn't even think about, but in some ways the SIBs are having the same experience. I mean, kind of something you'd never have in school unless they were twins living, working in the same classroom. So anyway, very interesting, great selection, and turned out to be really interesting group of people. Anybody else want to throw in a comment? Don't be shy. Caitlin, you're a shy person. I'm afraid you're not going to say anything.
I was just wondering about what Nick was talking about, like if they have like any concerns with COVID at all, gathering a bunch of kids together like that.
That's a good question, and it's actually something I wish I brought up more, because I think I just kind of assumed that that they like had some sort of like agreement or understanding about it, and it honestly like only came up really once, just that like their parents had gotten tested and were negative, which was kind of interesting. But in terms of like the actual kids, it was almost like there was like this understood thing that like it's not as dangerous for kids or something, and that like didn't really come up, but something I wish I had kind of pushed further. But I didn't, but I was just kind of worried about like getting into like her own like personal beliefs if it like got political or something in terms of like her beliefs about COVID, because I just didn't really know where she stood on that as well. So that's a really good question. Wish I'd pushed further on it.
I'm glad you brought that up about the potential politics of it, because that's really something you as a hot button issue, which I think you were suggesting it was could be a hot button issue. That's really something that instead of leaning away from, you kind of want to lean into, because if it's hot, then that's where you kind of want to go, even though it's uncomfortable. It's counterintuitive, but in really trying to get into cross-cultural kinds of things, which you're sort of saying, well, these people may be from a different culture in a way. That's something that when you're uncomfortable, that's a great sign that that's something you want to find out. So just as a kind of point for the future. So good for you. Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I have another question real quick for the group. Were all of your schools Michigan as one? And then second, are they all now virtual? I don't know, because I know my high school went virtual, everybody else went virtual. That was in Michigan. Okay.
Nick, yours were in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, Minnesota. Yep.
But everybody else was Michigan.
Right.
I think. Okay. But we had a lot of diversity, Maggie, even, within that. So, gosh, Nick, I was just curious as hell about how to, there's been so much conflict in Minnesota, and I just, around the racial conflict, and I wondered if that, I don't know, maybe it's just perverse curiosity, but that's something that popped into my mind right away.
In terms of the interviews or
just I don't know, maybe that's a bias, but I mean, knowing that was Minnesota where the George Floyd killing occurred?
Yeah, in South Minneapolis. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like COVID and then that. I mean, that's a double whammy, huh?
Yeah. I think it came out too that George Floyd, I think when they did his autopsy, he had COVID. which was another weird kind of detail
Hmm.
that came out.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was really bizarre. And I was in I had just come back from Michigan at that point. 'Cause that was in March, right? That was after everything kind of had gotten shut down. Everybody went home. So I was home when that happened. I mean, I like was seeing the smoke from the
Mm,
from
mm.
where a lot of the riots were taking place. It was really, it was really it was a really bizarre time.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, anybody else? So I think the next question that we want to go to, and let's start with Mackenzie, because we picked on Lauren first and now she gets a rest. What impressed you about your informants and their answers? So now we can kind of get into what answers they gave, but sort of pick the ones that were really stuck out as interesting and that kind of gave you an aha moment. Okay.
I guess what interested me most was kind of the disconnect between parents and teachers during all of this in some aspects for like high school students, because a lot of the communication that she mentioned was between the teacher and her granddaughter. And
Mhm.
like it was kind of up to her granddaughter, because she's a junior in high school, to like manage herself in a lot of aspects. And so a lot of times Penny didn't really know what was going on, like say at like the granddaughter had a few missing assignments. It was only until it exceeded a certain point that the teacher would point it out, and then she had to really like, I guess, get onto her granddaughter for submitting things. And I guess I was surprised. I don't know if it's like this at every school. It's probably not, but just like the lack of communication between the parents or guardians and the teachers. This could be because it's a low income area and maybe there is a huge shortage of teachers, she also mentioned, within the school. So a lot of teachers are taking on subjects that they're really shouldn't be, teaching as much, because there's just not enough staff to cover all the classes. So I guess that was also interesting to hear, was the lack of teachers for the amount of students that they have. What else?
Wow.
I guess, yeah, that would probably be my biggest like interesting thing, was the communication deficits and the fact that teachers are being overloaded. I'm sure that adds to stress to the teachers, which probably affects like teacher performance, which affects student performance, which is like one big feedback loop. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is, because in some respects, the teacher wouldn't, the parents or the grandparent wouldn't really be in the loop in the school. But now it's sort of expected that they should be in the loop to help the students. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. And another interesting thing was, because she's so involved with the school, like volunteering, that she has teachers who are her friends, which is why she pretty much knows what's going on with her granddaughter, because without that connection, it's kind of like a bit like a chain link missing from the order of things. So
So it sounds like this is a really engaged grandmother.
she's very, very engaged.
uh Poor kid can't get away with anything.
Yeah.
uh, and you said something about the concern about GPA and how the expectations.
Yeah. So I know from this, when COVID first started like becoming more prominent, like back in March, and all the schools shut down, this school decided that as long as the students passed their classes, that it wouldn't count towards their well, even if
Right.
it wouldn't count towards their GPA either way. Like they would get the credit or they wouldn't get the credit. And something that she experienced with her granddaughter was that her granddaughter kind of thought, oh, it doesn't matter because it doesn't count anyways.
Oh.
Get by with the bare minimum and not put effort and still pass, and my GPA will still be high, because she's a high performing student. She has over a 3.7. So it was kind of seeing this high performing student go drop down to way below their capabilities and just get by with the bare minimum because it doesn't affect them, and kind of how she navigated that situation, because obviously you want your kid to do well, but at the same time you have to be understanding of the situation. So she like talked about her struggles with that.
Okay, great. We're over. So this is great. Thank you, Mackenzie. But we're going to have to move on. So remember to keep some notes, and if something rings a bell, write it down in terms of your own experience. Caitlin, go ahead. So we're talking about what impressed you about your informants and their answers.
Like I said, like I wasn't able to do it this week.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we saved some time there. Thanks. Okay. Ellington.
Yeah, so mine was really interesting. So I actually do have twin sisters, but they're in different classes. But all my siblings go to the same school, and it was really interesting to hear how different their experiences were. For example, my younger brother, who's older than my twin sisters, he didn't really express that he really liked online classes, but my younger sisters were like, yeah, I love it. It's awesome. Like, I would want to continue to do school like this. I think that might have to do with the fact that there's 3 of them in the house. So they're not really lonely. They have other kids with them to be able to like play or whatever. And then also they are really like tech savvy. They know more stuff about their computer than I do. They were teaching me things that I didn't know. And they play a lot of video games. So they're already really like used to being kind of in a digital format of things. That's where most of their playtime comes from, their video games or whatever. So some things that I found interesting. One, I asked about like the advantages and disadvantages, and my one sister said safety, and that was the only person out of everybody that I asked who said like safety, like being safe from the coronavirus. Everybody else was just kind of thinking of like what classes look like. My other sibling said, oh, it's easy to just get up in the morning and just get online. I don't have to walk the hallways. So I was like, wow, that's a really interesting perspective, because I didn't even think of that for advantages and disadvantages, but she had. Something else that I found really interesting was the lack of interaction between the teacher and the students. My siblings expressed that they're really talked at, and they're not really given opportunities to talk with their teachers or interact with them. And they also talked about they don't really have those opportunities with their other classmates as well. So only one of my siblings was in a class where they did breakout rooms, and they could actually talk to other students about their schoolwork and how they were doing and have actual conversations. Other than that, they kind of just said that they were on mute and they just watched their teacher talk. They also don't really have breaks. So one thing I had asked them was, do you have a break for like recess? Because when you're at school, you get to go and play. And they said, nope, they get lunch and then that's it. And then they go back to class, which I found very interesting. Yeah, and I was like, that's really upsetting, because play is a big, I've taken a lot of like developmental classes for psychology, and play is a really big factor in learning for younger kids. So that was kind of sad for me to hear that they weren't having that aspect in their classes. They also talked to me about losing some of their special classes. So they're literally called their specials. So like music, gym, art, and other things. So they do have gym, but all the other ones are gone. They don't have any more of those specials. And their gym is like, they watch some videos and then they do whatever the videos, they do whatever the videos tell them to do. But it's not like with the class, they just do it on their own and on their own time.
Wow, that's really different and a very interesting perspective. This is 4th and 5th grade, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole notion of being talked at with no interaction for like half a day sounds really kind of gruesome.
Yeah, that really upset me to hear that, honestly, because I know in college that's kind of how it is, but that's kind of expected. I feel like that's
you're paying for that privilege to be gruesomed.
I mean, but like lectures, you don't really have too much interaction. It's normally like discussion where you have that piece of like interaction. But I remember being in elementary school and it was more, you had more time to like do work with other students or talk with other people or talk with the teacher. My siblings kind of expressed that they didn't feel comfortable really asking questions to the teacher because they do it in front of the entire class. Instead of like being able to like call them over and ask like, hey, can I have help with this? They would have to unmute and ask a question in front of the entire class. So they're kind of like shying away from asking for help when they needed it.
So what, I want to move on, but what was your general impression? Were they upset, disappointed? I mean, sounds like one was happy because they were safe, but what was your general impression?
Overall, I don't think they minded it too much. I think they adapted to it well. They didn't see too many problems with it. The kid that I interviewed in high school, he did not like it at all. Like he almost had nothing positive to say about it. But I think that's also a difference in like in how you socialize. Like he plays video games too, but he's also like in sports and other things in school. Whereas my siblings aren't, so it'd be kind of harder to like transition to just being online.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thank you. Now now something happened. Everybody moved around. So I guess I'm going to go to Maggie. Go ahead, Maggie.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, what Ellington just said is really, really interesting to me because my high school, the virtual is very different in how it's set up. So first, and I think, okay, so my high school is in a very poor area. For example, everybody gets free and reduced lunch and breakfast. And we have like, let's say 350 kids in my high school, like setting up, it's really small, it's a low income area. My high school, the preparation they did to make sure this was as good as it could be for the students was like phenomenal. So I was talking to my dad about this and they ended up buying hotspots for everyone who needed them. So it was $20,000 a month they're spending on internet services. And that's so students can do homework if they don't have Wi-Fi. All students 5th or 12th grade were given a Chromebook from our school, and that was, I think the school ended up purchasing 200 or more than what they already had. So all 5th through 12th were able to have laptops, and everyone who needed hotspots can get internet access. So there's no issue there. About a third of the middle school, high school student body is virtual. And then the big part of what this is, so there are, the elementary's in a different boat, and I wasn't able to interview any elementary teachers, so I don't know how they're set up. But for middle school and high school virtual students, they're all on the program called Ingenuity. And with that, it's kind of set up like Khan Academy, if you guys know or have done that, but better. So they have, every week they have a schedule. They're required to spend about 35 to 45 minutes per class a day to stay on track. They have 6 classes a day, so they're spending less time virtually, students are, than they would in person. And it's very self-paced. They have all the assignments that they need to do. I think Ingenuity is set up, or it is set up. So to watch a lecture, there are in a lecture quizzes that you're taking to make sure you're engaged with material, and then quizzes at the end of the section. You're able to retake those a couple of times, and then there are tests that you're able to retake a couple of times. And the really cool part about this is that because we have 3 or 4 teachers in charge of the virtual program where they're reaching out to kids, the goal is reaching out to everyone twice a week, which is a lot of students, and that's a lot of contacts. But it's a very one-on-one base, so pretty much the students are able to, if at any point they have any questions, and they go through any material, they send email to one of the teachers who are in charge of this program, and they can set up like Google Meets. My parents both would record them doing problems, like math problems, science problems, record themselves doing it, or meet with students on like a virtual, like a Zoom or a Google Meet, to go over any questions they had. So it was more individualized than like class in person would have been. even.
So I'm getting the picture, Maggie, that this is a small high school, 300 or so students. Both your parents work there, right?
Yeah.
So, and do you think the size, and there's a ton of investment in technology,
Right.
is what you
I
seem to
I
be
do
saying.
think a lot the pay to do that came from the CARES Act, because I was really curious because that's not something normally my high school would have been able to afford, but I think there was like a COVID package CARES Act that went for the school to cover that.
I see. Great. So I wonder if just possibly that this is a smaller school, people are, see, do you think it's more like a community investment? I mean, even, or there's a kind of, sometimes big schools are harder to
Mhm.
organize. And so I just wonder what your impression was.
I'm not sure. I think because even the schools around us, they're all in very similar sizes, but the way their programs are set up, they'll have a virtual option. Um, it's much different than what Lake City's doing, my high school's doing, and in a worse way. I know, like, for one example, one of the schools, they have a school bus going around to different places and parking in a parking lot for a couple hours, and that's gonna be their hotspot, so students can park and work on work from the school bus's Wi-Fi. So I think a lot of it was on, like, the principals and my superintendent sitting down and, um, like, the caring about the students more.
Mm. Okay, great. I mean, I have 100 questions I'd like to ask all of you, but I don't think we're going to have time. But maybe you guys can chip in with some of your observation and issues. And so thank you, Maggie. Let's go to Layla. Did you say you had done the interviews or not, Layla?
No,
I forgot. Yeah. Okay, so we'll skip over that and go to Nick. So the question is, Nick, yeah, okay, you're unmuted. What impressed you about your informants and their answers?
Well, I was impressed with with the pod, I was impressed with how they were able to organize this in terms of having some of like the older, like, so the age range was from like kindergarten to 7th grade. So they were able to have like a couple of the older kids kind of keep an eye out for the younger ones, which showed to me like put it like kind of asked a lot of the older kids in terms of like taking on some kind of like leadership role and being somewhat more of a parent. And it's something that they said that they were like really proud of. It's something that she said she was really proud of, is that because that was one of my main questions was how exactly, if you're working and your husband's working too, how do you keep like a close eye and make sure that everybody's doing it? And that's the kind of the response they had, was that, these older kids took on kind of more of a parent role. And so that was really impressive to me that they were able to do that. I don't know if that's something that could be like replicated super well, but I also was just impressed with how they were also able to, Ellington talked about like the importance of play and stuff, and that was something that was impressive to me about the pod, was that you got a lot of, like, these kids are all super tight outside of school. Like they're all like best friends, like in their neighborhood and stuff. And so when they're done with school, they were able to like kind of play together and stuff outside when like the weather was still nice, and we're able to do all of that together. So that part I thought was a major benefit of having that kind of system. Obviously there are COVID concerns that we talked about, so that's like another, and obviously something that I wish I'd pressed further on. And then with Lauren, who is the teacher, I was really impressed with how, like, just her kind of grit and her perseverance through it, because it really sounded like it was a pretty enormous challenge every day, working with these kids and these kids kind of coming from all sorts of backgrounds in terms of what they had access to, what their situation was like with their parents. Some had learning disabilities, and they were kind of thrust into a regular classroom. So it was just, like the range of what she was working with was so much, and was all over the place. And so that was really impressive to me, that she was able to, what sounded like she was doing a pretty good job.
Mhm.
So that was really impressive to me.
This
and
was the
just-
inner city charter, right?
Yeah, interstate charter.
Mhm.
Actually, not far. I think not far from where a lot of those riots were happening. Actually, in South Minneapolis, which
Mhm.
to go back to what we were talking about earlier. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah.
Oh no, you're good. So yeah, so that was really impressive to me. Another thing that stood out to me was kind of the lengths that she would go to make sure that these kids had the right, that they were able to engage still with the class. I think that she basically kind of on her own had to work with like a lot of the tech people like at her school in getting technology to some of these kids that didn't have it. And I think they were, as in like a charter school situation, I think that's something that they were capable of doing. And so she kind of had to organize like who didn't have, like who had what, who didn't have access to what, and how exactly to get this technology into these kids' hands that didn't have it. So
Yeah,
that was really impressive.
my son worked in a charter in New Jersey, and it was bilingual and not rich
Yeah.
by any means. So they didn't have that charter didn't have a lot of money for technology. So how did they work that?
They had like an iPad program where they had, I mean, it was originally for everybody like in the school. They had iPads like stationed at the school that everybody would be able to use. And then I think it was a matter of actually getting them into the hands of people like at their home. So I don't know exactly what the financial situation of the charter school was. I know that they had at least the adequate funding enough to do something on that scale, which is
Okay, cool. That's really important. What strikes me among all of these, and then we'll go to Lauren, who's the first will be last, but now you're going to be next, was the diversity of these experiences. I mean, it's all over the map, especially yours with the pod in the basement, and then the inner city school, charter inner city school, which is, but very interesting differences. Yeah. So Lauren, and then we're coming up on 153. I think we just about made it with these two questions. What were your impressions of your informants and their answers?
So like I was saying before, I was very happy that she was open with me and transparent about the situation as a whole. I mean, as transparent as she could be, because I mean, she is. You can't just tell whatever the school board is all doing, but she was very open with me about the whole situation and their planning. One question I asked was like, have you noticed any mental strain with the students? And she was talking about not just for classes, but she was worried about the lack of socialization that the students were getting because there's no between class interaction with students. There's no turn to your partner and work on this anymore. And it's really to be able to interact with one another. It would be after class, like literally calling one another or texting one another. So she was worried about that. And the first question that I asked, like, how has the pandemic affected the business you do, like in the school? She talked a lot about how, like, a lot of responsibility fell on educators to make sure that the students were getting the education that they deserve. So, for example, as a principal, she talks to a lot of other principals and school staff across the county and across the like Detroit Metro Detroit area. And she was talking about like how in Detroit, she knew that there would be a high likelihood for face to face because if there isn't face to face, then there aren't going to be students being taught at all. There isn't going to be an option for them. Their parents are working, nobody can stay home with them, lack of internet access and things like that. So that would be a necessity for them that thankfully our school district doesn't have to worry about because we're a little smaller, but DPS is huge and it covers a wide range of area. She talked about how like that falls on the teachers. Now they have to come in or somebody has to come in and make sure that they are talking to certain families like, hey, make sure your kid's doing this, or hey, have you done this today? So more than just like what they would do in class, but like physically reaching out. She said that sometimes she makes home visits to check on people who she knew were struggling because she wanted to make sure they had what they needed because she wants the students to be educated. That is her goal. She's an educator and she wants them to get the best education that they can. And she said that the workload has probably doubled because it's not just go about walking through school. Now it's, like I said, making home visits, calls all the time. She ran late for our meeting because she was coming from another meeting that was a necessity that was called randomly in the AM before ours. So things like that, like this needs to happen right now. You need to come have this meeting with me right now because it shifts so much. So she talked a lot about things like that. And then I asked her about her own mental well-being. She was like, it's been very stressful. And she's always been a very active person. So she says she does walks with like her dog. She gets on her, I think she has a bike or a Peloton, something like that. And she does that in between when she has the chance because it's a big pick me up for her. And they have wellness check groups for the teachers because they don't have like the staff talking to, like the like socialization there. They don't have like staff meetings in person anymore like that, or just regular conversation with staff that become acquaintances and friends. So they just have wellness check groups that they all set up with to like take accountability for one another, like accountability check groups. I don't know what it's called, but things like that for just wellness in general.
Wow, that's a great perspective. The principal, your informant was the principal, and it reminds me that someone else said that there was a shortage of teachers. That was Mackenzie, and I think what's happening is that people are just there's a certain number of teachers who just can't make this pivot. And you really highlighted about how much more work there is to it to adapt. And so, in fact, my son's principal, I hate to keep talking about my son, but what the heck? She's just given her notice because I have a feeling it was just became too much. And this wellness thing is a great everyone's talking about that in the social service area, is how are you making sure that your therapists and social workers and teachers are okay, because you don't have the normal check-ins. So there's a lot of adaptation. What strikes me is even if it weren't, some of this is probably more difficult when it's virtual, but there's a lot of adaptation. So this notion of wellness checks is a really interesting, since you can't see a person, you have to implement a special program to have a wellness group, you said. That's very interesting.
My school is very small though, so it honestly makes a lot of sense. It was like max 500 people in the school at one point, probably less than that. Like my graduating class was 92 people. That gives you.
This is in Southfield.
Yeah, it's just a smaller school in Southfield. It's like set up as a college prep school.
Oh, okay.
Smaller than the other schools. This is why I really want to talk to somebody there, but they're busy, so I can't.
Yeah.
And I want to see my aunt who works for DPS. No, she doesn't. Not anymore.
Yeah.
She works in Farmington, but her kids still go to DPS schools, and I'm going to ask her, but she's busy. She teaches, and then she's also making sure they're doing their classwork, helping them with their classwork at the same time. But I'm going to try and text her instead, and I hope that's okay. Because I think it's a really good perspective that I just can't. She cannot talk to me. She's very busy. So that's the next plan.
Great. Okay, so I want to give a chance we're out at almost 2:00. So I want to give you a chance to exchange notes and observations from this next set of questions. Anything you wrote down that struck you as interesting and comparable, different, similar, but
I have so much to say, but I don't want to go over time, so I'll keep really brief. But if we would have continued the question you just asked, I know only Lauren is able to answer it. Mine was very similar in general. My respect, I've always had a really high respect for educators and teachers, but after seeing how they've been handling this and all of the extra responsibilities put on them, it is just like doubled. They're doing so much, and like looking at this, it's really brought that to my attention.
Yeah, great point. we can continue on. I mean, I know maybe some of you are home and you don't have the kind of demands you had. If you do, you're welcome to leave because it's at 2 o'clock, but we can continue. We don't have to shut it down unless, and of course you can determine what whether you need to go. So let's just continue on until we, for at least another 15 minutes, if you don't mind.
I'll go.
Okay with everybody?
I have to go if that's
okay. Lauren.
And if he's gonna go.
Well, thank
it was
you.
very interesting to just see like what the school boards are doing to make sure that students have access to internet. Like what Maggie was saying, like that is expensive to do, to provide hotspots for students who need it. $20,000 a month is not something light in a school situation because it's already a lack of funding and whatnot. So I saw that there and with mine as well. And I think it was really interesting about Ellington's family was that like the safety part. Like
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about going to school and potentially coming into contact with COVID. That's really important. So yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But I also have to go too. So bye y'all.
Okay, good, Lauren. And Nick, you have to go too.
Yeah, as do I.
Yeah, I didn't realize I could have gone over today. I have a meeting with my group for a project.
Okay,
tomorrow,
well, we'll
so-
meet next week and there's a couple more questions. So this is kind of the format. I think it's kind of intriguing and
Mhm.
interesting. I'm really delighted and I'm glad I've got it recorded so I can go back and pick up things that I missed. So thank you so much, Maggie, if you have to go, and Nick.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
cool.
Thank you.
Caitlin, are you going to run?
Yeah, I've got an
Okay.
assignment to do soon, so
Okay. Okay, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you
Okay.
doing?
Oh, it's so weird. It's starting to get to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Um,
okay. It's not bad getting to me. It's just, I think you sort of trade one set of anxieties for another. There was the election where everybody was kind of hyper vigilant about that. There was Thanksgiving, hyper vigilant about that. And now we're going into this, COVID increased thing. And so it's just
Yeah,
one
me,
damn thing after another.
yeah, like being home this full semester, I've been concerned about COVID, but not the same way other people have. But I just found out my dad tested positive, and
Oh my
so
goodness.
yeah, so I'm staying at my mom's house. But it's
Oh,
kind of it's different when it's personal like that,
of course.
Yeah, so it's pretty stressful now.
Mm. Oh my goodness. Well, hang in there. Gosh. And I hope he's okay. Any symptoms? Where is he at in the?
I'm not really sure. He said he took a test yesterday because he had a
Mm.
fever, and he got his results last night saying he was positive.
Mm.
Because I guess a lot of people at his work have been testing positive lately.
Mm. Okay. Well, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that, and I hope it's minor. How old is he?
Yeah.
And yeah.
46. So
Oh, he's okay.
yeah.
But you never know. So I don't want to catastrophize it, but so.
Yeah.
All right. So if you need to talk, just give me a ring.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All
Okay.
right, I'll see you
Talk
next
to you.
week.
Yes. See you next week.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.